People will often leave comments on my videos saying, how do you get access to the best Rolex watches? Well, I kind of want to flip that on you guys. How do you get access to the Rolex watches from the AD? Well, I've spoken to thousands of you now, and I think I know the answer. So I have a watch business called Watch Life, and I speak to people every day about watches, how they got them from the AD, and I've learned a lot about how ADs work. For people that don't know, Rolexes are incredibly difficult to buy brand new. If you go to a retail store and ask for a Rolex, and even if you've got all the money, they're probably not going to sell you a Rolex, especially if it's your first time in there. Why do they do this? Well, they want to create demand, they want to increase popularity and awareness of these Rolexes, so they'll create this scarcity of these watches, even if they do have them in the back, which they most likely do, but they just choose not to sell it to you. And to be honest, it infuriates people. But what people sometimes fail to understand is that if you go in and ask for a very popular Rolex, you might think that they're being rude, turning you down, but you're probably the 500th person that day to ask for the watch you're asking for. And so there are things that you can do to improve and enhance your chances of actually getting the watches that you want, and that's what I'm going to talk about today in this video. Look, it really does help to have deep pockets. Spending a lot of money is the easiest and the quickest way to get the watches that you want. And the reason for that is because ADs operate as a business. So if you scratch their back, so to speak, they will also scratch yours. What does spending more money actually mean? Well, you can spend money on jewelry in the AD. You can also buy other branded watches, so not Rolex. And maybe you could buy Rolex, but just buy the ones that they struggle to sell. For example, a full gold watch. I speak to people all the time that have spent tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands at their AD. And sometimes their spend isn't even a drop in the ocean in comparison to what some people are spending. You think you spend a lot, but actually there are some people in this world that are spending millions, and you just can't compete with that. But you don't have to compete directly, because you could also go about this a different way. You could just become very close to them. You could be best friends with them. If you build a relationship from nothing and they decide to invite you to events and you invite them to whatever, I don't know, you could be in with a very good shout of getting the watches that you want without having to spend a load of money. But this is much easier said than done, because sparking a relationship from nothing with a member of the sales team, and both of you know the underlying motive really is, to get the watch that you want, it's tricky. It really is tricky. So there is that. I think there has to be an element of helping them out for them to then help you. But if they like you, this massively helps. And I've met people that have done this. They've built a relationship from nothing. They've not had to spend loads and loads of money, but they did it because they were very friendly people and they were very honest and easy to get on with. My advice in this scenario would just to be nice, be friendly, be honest about what you want, but don't be demanding. Don't push for anything. Don't ask over and over again. And if you're nice and you build a relationship, they will offer you something at some point. And I've met people that have done this, super friendly people. They've not had to spend a lot of money, but because of their character, they were able to get some good watches. Now, if you don't sit in either of these buckets where you can be super charming and charismatic and you don't have a lot of money to spend, what then? Well, you could have the best story ever. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, you might not want to spend all the money, you might not want to waste loads of time building a relationship, blah, blah, blah. So you could just be a completely unique individual that has an amazing life story or an amazing passion project that you're working on. For example, I've met several people that have had incredible stories and they were able to get the watches that they wanted because of their lifestyle and the things that they were working on. For example, I knew a guy that was climbing Mount Everest, he got an Explorer. I knew a commercial pilot, he got a GMT. I knew a commercial diver. Guess what he got? He got a Submariner. Why does this work? Well, it perfectly aligns with Rolex's values. It gives someone a reason to ask for the watches that they want. It makes sense. It makes complete sense. These are tool watches. It's arguable if we use them for practical purposes anymore, but it makes them seem unique and it gives them a great story and it's a great proposition. It's all about selling yourself, right? So what better story to tell than something that you're working on in your life? And look, if your life isn't particularly interesting or you don't have any great hobbies that you can use, you could just make something up. I wouldn't advise it, but you could. And lastly, this isn't something that I'm advising, but I know that it happens, so I will mention it. And again, this is not advice, and I'm not saying that this is okay to do, but some people will pay their way and they will get watches that they want by doing this. I advise to not do this, but I'm letting you know that this happens. Some people will pay for watches. However, before you do that, I would advise to really think about how much money you're going to spend over a period of time. You could just bypass all of that and just come to a watch reseller like myself with Watch Life and get the watches that you want from day one instead of having to, pay your way to the watches. But each to their own. There's a very strong argument now to not even bother with ADs altogether. And the reason I say that is not so that I can sell more watches, but instead it's to save you guys years of waiting and tens, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds. And in a lot of cases, you'd actually make a loss on some of the watches that you would have to buy to get the actual watch that you want. If you did buy the watch you want from the grey market, for example, Watch Life, you would avoid all of these things. Now, I run a luxury watch business, so how do I choose which watches to buy? For me, I look at a number of different factors, one of them being the popularity of the model. I will really try and focus on buying watches that are popular, in demand, that a lot of people want to buy. And the reason I do this is because I don't want to sit on stock for too long. I want a good turnover of watches every week and every month. So how popular the watch is, for me, is incredibly important. And I would say the best example of this at the moment is probably a Pepsi GMT, a Panda Daytona, a Bruce Wayne GMT, or a Black Subdate. These are the best examples where I can put money into an asset and then get it back pretty quickly to recycle and go again. Also, following on from point number one, the condition and the age of the watch is also something that I pay very close attention to, because we as humans like to buy and own the newest stuff. And the same applies with watches as it does with cars and houses and all the other kind of asset classes. So for me, buying a watch that is a brand new 2025 is a smart decision because more people want the newest stuff. And also with that, the condition being as brand new and as unworn as possible as well, because most of the time, that is what you guys are asking me for. Some people don't care too much because they're going to wear a watch anyway and it's going to be worn over time. But typically speaking, if you're going to spend 10, 20, 30 plus thousand pounds on a watch, you want it to be right. You want it to look brand new. Also, another really interesting point is the price point of a watch. Now, my business will sell probably 10 watches at 10 to 15K. So something like a Datejust 41 Blue for every one watch that is 25 to 30K plus. So knowing that, I know that more people are going to be buying 10 to 15K watches, and therefore I buy more of those priced watches than I do 50K, 100K watches, just because think about it as a pyramid. The higher you go up the pyramid in terms of price point, the less people that sit at the top and can afford a 100 gram watch. At the bottom of the pyramid, more people can afford a 10K Datejust. So I'm conscious of that, and it's a decision that I've made based on trying to get a mass audience. I take a shotgun approach where I try and get as many people as possible, versus being niche and taking a rifle approach, you could say, where I hone in and focus on someone who's only willing to buy a watch that's 100K plus. That's just the way that I do it at the moment. It may change. It's not to say that I don't also buy expensive watches, because I do, but most of the time, the daily stuff, the sports steel models are what I will stock.